Hey y'all, welcome back to the Holistic Sovereign Show. Today we are going to be looking at the birth certificate scam, quote unquote. So let's get into that. I explained in the last video that the way I want to do most of these episodes is we're going to just be essentially breaking down PDFs together, information, doing research together. And that I think is going to cut down on a lot of work I need to do because that was something that felt pretty overwhelming for me in the beginning of wanting to start a business around this, creating content around this. I was like, how could I ever possibly capture everything that I want to convey to the people? And God was like, listen, the information's already out there. You just need to share it. So that is the goal. If you're looking at the window here in the corner where it's showing my face, it might lag a little bit sometimes. I hope not, but it is what it is. So just be aware that might happen. Hopefully the recording itself does not lag. It's just the video. So let's get into this birth certificate PDF. This is on Scribd, as you can see here. I hope you can see my little cursor. And if you guys are not watching on YouTube or Rumble, this is a good episode to watch. I will be reading everything to you, so you don't technically need to be watching, but it would be better for you to watch. Also, I apologize for this lighting. I know most of you don't care about this kind of stuff, but it irritates the heck out of me because I come from a content creation background and I'm just kind of like, you know, shoestringing it right now. I don't need to. I could just go get a ring light. But anyway, so I'm just going to be reading this to you and then I'm going to be looking at other reference documents and making suggestions for you guys to do more research. So let's get into this birth certificate document. So essentially this was on a website called helppeoplenow.com. I have tried to look it up. It doesn't exist anymore, so that's fun for us. But this PDF exists on Scribd, so we'll just get right into it. And I'm just going to read it to you guys. The birth certificate, or birth certificates. In 1921, the Federal Shepherd-Towner Maternity Act created the birth registration, or what we now know as the birth certificate. It was known as the Maternity Act and was sold to the American people as a law that would reduce maternal and infant mortality, protect the health of mothers and infants, and for, quote, other purposes. This is really funny because if you know anything about the US, you know that we have one of the highest what's it called? Maternal and infant mortality rates, or highest birth mortality rates, I should say. So this is kind of funny that they introduced this because back in the day when birth was done privately and birth was considered natural, which today it's not, there wasn't as high of a mortality rate with birth. Like, mortality rates have actually gone up because of how industrialized and medicalized birth has become. So that's just kind of funny to me. But let's keep going through this PDF. So one of those other purposes provided for the establishment of a federal bureau designed to cooperate with state agencies in the overseeing of its operations and expenditures. What it really did was create a federal birth registry, which exists today, creating, quote, federal children. So let's do a quick look at the Shepherd-Towner Maternity and Infancy Protection Act. This is just an article that was published also in 2017. So what we're reading, the PDF we're reading is from 2017. I don't know if that's when it was written, but that's when it's date marked. So it just goes over the history of the act in November 1921. It was introduced, blah, 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 all these statistics. Now, what I found interesting in this, and you can go and read this if you want, you have the URL up here. It's an Arizona State University article. So what I found interesting down here is when it was talking about people who opposed the bill. So I'm going to read this to you. Others opposed the bill, including members of the American Gynecological Society, founded in New York City, who argued that the act would interfere with private medical practices and potentially lead to socialized medicine. Still, others, such as Mary Kilbreth, president of the National Association Opposed to Women's Suffrage, headquartered in New York City, claimed that the bill was part of a communist plot to put families under the control of government bureaucracy. I wonder why she thought that. So this goes on to talk about the bill. I didn't read the whole thing. I just thought that that one part was really interesting. And then there's some sources down at the bottom here if you want to read more about it, but let's go back to our PDF. So it created federal children was where we left off. This government, under the doctrine of parens patriae, which if we look over here, parens patriae is in law, it refers to the public policy power of the state to intervene against an abusive or negligent parent, legal guardian, or informal caretaker, and to act as the parent of any child, individual, or animal who is in need of protection. So basically, when you get that birth certificate, you are giving the government jurisdiction over your child, meaning that this law, parens patriae, or I guess this is a, let me see, it's a phrase. This applies to your child then, and you as parents. Basically, the state is the head of household, if you will, and gets to decide ultimately what happens to your child. So now this legislates for American children as if they are owned by the federal government through the public school enrollment process and continuing license requirements for most aspects of daily life. These children grow up to be adults indoctrinated into the process of asking for permission from daddy government to do all those things necessary to carry out daily activities that exist in what is called a, quote, free country. So something that's really important to note here is the continuation of consent, right? Because it's not just the one time that you consent to your children being under the jurisdiction of the government. It is through many other steps, including, it says here, through public school enrollment and continuing license requirements, right? So you are continuously consenting. And this is the same thing with when we want next week, we're going to talk about the assumed name, you know, your legal entity, the straw man, all of that. We're going to talk about that next week, but it's the same thing there. Okay. What we're going to see is it's a continual consent of giving up your rights, of saying, take jurisdiction over me, government, right? Asking for permission. So there's a few other documents that I wanted to look at with you guys. We are going to go through this whole one, so don't worry. However, I wanted to look at, I'm trying to think if I want to do that now or in a little bit here. Yeah, let's go ahead and look at one of these documents. So this might be something that you guys have seen before. I posted about this on TikTok. So if you're coming from TikTok, hello, happy to have you here. And this is a form. This is a public announcement that is from 1912, actually. So the dates here are very interesting because then the Shepard-Towner Act was introduced in 1921, but as we know, 1912, 1913 is when a lot of things were coming into play. If you know your history, if you've been studying this stuff for a while, you know that like the Fed was created around the same time, the IRC, IRS, like all these different things, right? It was kind of in that. And then if you know economic history, financial history, you know that that was around the time that a lot of things were shifting in society. That this is where, at that period in time, was when the current system that we're in now was introduced. A lot of it was being brought out, and obviously it's brought out in waves. However, here is an example of a, I think this is really funny, but obviously it's alarming too, but also very telling. So this was a public notice. I'll read it here. It says, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the Department of Health. Suggestions concerning the importance of birth registration. The legislature of Pennsylvania in 1905 enacted a law requiring every child born within the state to be registered with the local registrar of the district in which the birth occurred. Also, that the original certificate should be filed and permanently preserved in the Bureau of Vital Statistics of the State Department of Health at the state capitol. Certified copies of these birth records may be secured at any time. So this is your certificate of live birth, right? Which is what they're talking about. Such copies are not only important, but necessary for purposes of transmission to foreign countries, for establishing the age of children, for school entrance, for labor certificates, and many other legal formalities. The responsibility for registering a birth is placed upon the physician or midwife in attendance at the time of birth, or if no physician or midwife is present, then the duty falls upon the father or mother. If the birth occurs in an institution, the person in charge is responsible. This law is designed to protect the civil and legal rights of your child in the years to come. This is my favorite part. It is an inheritance to which every child is entitled. Tell me this doesn't read like those freaking ads from like the early 2000s where it's like, the starving children of Africa. This is kind of how it feels to me. Anyway. And then, in the arms of an angel, like just imagine that's playing in the background. So let's keep reading. It establishes for all time the identity of your children when perhaps it can no longer appeal to its father or mother in its behalf. See to it that your baby is properly registered. A baby that is worth having is surely worth registering. Give the baby a chance in after years to know of your interests and its future welfare. Make it possible through registration for your child to be able to show in a legal way when and where it was born and who its parents were. People nowadays register their cattle, horses, dogs, etc., because they are proud of them and because it adds to their value. Put the babies in the same class with the domestic animals, and they will be, in the coming years, do more than the animals will do. They will thank you if you are living and honor you if you are no longer with them to hear their thanks. From July 1st, 1912, signed by the Commissioner of Health. Now, if you are at all in the know about what's going on here, then you're aware this is a massive marketing ploy. I mean, just the fact that they don't really have any concrete reasons for why this needs to be done other than these like veiled threats of, you need this for legal formalities, and this protects their civil and legal rights, and it's an inheritance. Like, it's all very just this like pillowy, cushiony talk for appealing to your emotions, for why you should be doing this. So, there's not really any need for it. Anyway, I thought you guys would find that interesting. Let's keep going with our PDF here on birth certificates. Before 1921, the records of births and names of children were entered into family Bibles, as were the records of marriages and deaths. These records were readily accepted by both the family and the law as, quote, official records. Since 1921, the American people have been registering the births and names of their children with the government of the state in which they are born. even though there is no federal law requiring it. The state tells you that registering your child's birth through the birth certificate serves as proof that she was born in the United States, thereby making her a United States citizen. For the past several years, a social security number has been mandated by the federal government to be issued at birth. In 1923, a suit was brought against federal officials charged with the administration of the Maternity Act, charging that the act was unconstitutional. It purports to vest in agencies of the federal government powers which are almost wholly undefined in matters relating to maternity and infancy, and to authorize appropriations of federal funds for the purposes of the act. Many examples may be given and were stated in the debates on the bill in Congress of regulations which may be imposed under the act. So if I were you, I would do deeper study into what this suit was from 1923, right? What happened, what was said, what were the examples given? Because I believe that a lot of what they were, afraid of happening probably did and has in the last, 100 years. This was from 1923, so it's been 100 years. So if we look back, probably a lot of this came to pass, is what I'm guessing. That would be my guess. So if I were you and I was interested in looking further into this, I would check into the lawsuit and see what was going on there. So the forced registration of pregnancy, governmental prenatal examination of expectant mothers, restrictions on the right of a woman to secure the services of a midwife or physician or her own selection, are measures to which the people of those states which accept its provisions may be subjected. Now, it kind of outlines here for us, right? Like what they were saying they were afraid of happening. And honestly, this is what, happens. I mean, we don't have like a forced registration of pregnancy. We're all doing all of these things out of our own free will. But if you think about it, there is a lot of propaganda that has been fed to families and women in particular, basically telling women that they're incapable of taking care of themselves, that a pregnancy and birth needs to be a medical event that is being overseen by quote unquote professionals and doctors, right? Who are going to do a better job than you, mom. Mom, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what's happening, and you just need someone that is going to make sure that you're okay, that your baby's okay, and do it for your baby. Obviously, you care about your baby's health. You want to make sure your baby's okay. So it's a lot of fear mongering, and nowadays some of this is getting revealed, and there's actually countries like England, for example, that are advocating for home births more than they are hospital births, because home births statistically actually end up being safer than hospital births, because again, there is so much unnecessary interference in hospitals. Now, I'm not here to like sway you one way or the other, I'm just sharing information with you. So don't come at me in the comments being like, you're an idiot, I'm just telling you that these are the facts, okay? And if we look at kind of the history and the way that things are going, I would say 95% of women are willingly doing all of these things. They're basically registering their pregnancy by having, a doctor that they go to every however many weeks it is. And then having the prenatal examinations, governmental prenatal examinations, because we know that doctors are agents of the government. Restrictions on the right of a woman to secure the services of a midwife or physician. Actually, this has turned out to now midwives have to be licensed with the state to be a midwife. And that is an issue because, that means that if you get a midwife, then they are having to adhere to certain state requirements because the state is their boss, right? And if they don't, then they could lose their license, right? And I mean, this shows up in different industries. Like I'm in the financial services industry, I have to have a license with the state. You know, everything's a give and take. But as far as this situation comes, right, as far as the business of pregnancy and birth goes, obviously we're seeing a lot of this happen, but a lot of it is just being mandated through fear strategies, you know, fear mongering to get women to do these things of their own free will. So I think all of it is going on. It's just not going on at the level of dictatorship, right? Okay, so insurance of mothers may be made compulsory. The teaching of birth control and physical inspection of persons about to marry may be required. So these are some extreme examples, but again, everybody, again, does these things of their free will. We register our marriages, you know, get legally married, all that kind of stuff, because it's just what you do, right? That's what we're told. It's just what you do. So the Maternity Act was eventually repealed, but parts of it have been found in other legislative acts. What was once declared as unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of this nation in the past should be upheld in a court challenge today. The Constitution hasn't changed. What has changed is the way this government views human life. Today we are defined as human resources, believed to be owned by government. The government now wants us as individuals to be tagged and tracked. Government mandated or legislated national ID is unconstitutional any way you look at it. So let's look at this next part here, the real purpose of your birth certificate. Soon after you were born, the registered nurse or other hospital personnel asked your mother and or father to complete various necessary paperwork. Unfortunately, your parents were probably unaware of the following. Under Maritime Admiralty law, your parents, due to their prior birth registration, were already registered documented vessels. In addition, by virtue of their marriage license, the state is a third party to their marriage contract and its proceeds. Your parents produced an offspring, you, and they delivered their cargo into this world with the assistance of a registered doctor in the delivery room of the maternity ward or of the hospital, which is a registered port of entry for new vessels/wards. The hospital prepared a certificate of live birth with the all capital letters and recorded that delivery receipt in the commercial registry as cargo received. Wanted to go ahead and show you guys a few different birth certificate examples that I have here. So this, we're going to talk about a certificate of birth versus just a birth certificate. So here's one example. This is my mentor's Facebook group. He posts a lot of really great stuff. That's where I find a lot of these things. So this is the certificate of birth. So this says here at the top, the United States of America, Department of Commerce, Bureau of the Census, Washington, notification of birth registration. This certifies that the following record of birth is registered and preserved in the Office of the State Registrar of Vital Statistics at Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Name, George Mason Dunaway Jr., sex, male, number 159, date of birth, 3/1/1919. Place of birth, Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have the name of the father, maiden name of the mother, and then we've got the sign off here. So what's important here at the top is it says that this is a document of the Department of Commerce, which nowadays, you know, it doesn't say that anymore. You can look up a birth certificate in your state. At least I know that the Texas state birth certificates don't say this, or I should say certificates of birth. And then here would be an example of a birth certificate. So this is not a registration. This is just something that you can get to use as a birth certificate if you needed, right? But it's not a registration. So those are two different things. So it just says here it has the hospital name, the city, and the state. It certifies that baby's name you would put there was born to parents' names in this hospital at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday. So there are different versions of this that you can make. What's important here to see is like this has the little seal of the, vital records official seal. So obviously they went ahead and got this. Or maybe the hospital had it to where they already have this seal from the Office of Vital Records. So it just says that the certificate was signed and authorized, has an official seal. So you can create your own version of this and have it be like an affidavit of birth, if you want it, or you can call it whatever you want. It's a private record that you can use for public use if you need it, for like getting a birth certificate or, getting a social security number, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. We won't get into that yet, but I just wanted to give you guys this visual of what these birth certificates look like, right? What a registration looks like versus if you were to create your own. So like for me, for example, for my child, I'm creating my own. I'll probably get, 2 to 3 witnesses to sign off on it. If that, I'll get it notarized. Bada bing, bada boom. It's a document that we can use to get his passport, get a social security number if we wanted, right? And then that way he's not registered in the system either. So there is a little bit here that Bill wrote. So Bill, again, is the name of one of my mentors. This is in his Facebook group. So he wrote a really great blurb here, which we can read right now if you wanted. So he wrote here, I'm not a US citizen. You were handed a certificate of live birth, but that word birth isn't talking about you, the little man woman who came out of your mother's uterus. The WHO defines a live birth as the complete expulsion or extraction from its mother of a product of conception. More follows, but right after conception, the next word is irrespective. Take from that what you will. What I see is the expulsion of a product of conception. A product of conception. What was conceived? A name. Your mother gave you a name and you inherited a family name, which she immediately broke into a first, middle, last name on an SS5 form to beg a social security number. What was the product? The product wasn't you. It was a piece of paper. The entity that was born was the first, middle, last name. Who owns that name? Simply look at the top of the document. What's the entity at the top? Mine says Commonwealth of Kentucky. Well, this example says, well, here it says the Department of Commerce, but they'll say different things. The Commonwealth of Kentucky is a corporation, which is a subcorporation of the United States. The US owns that name and you're using it as if it is yours. Each state has assumed name laws. Any business name you use in any state must be registered. You didn't register the business name. You claim that you own or even that you are the name. Well, then you committed fraud. And that makes you subject to numerous fines, penalties, arrests, taxes, and so on and so forth. One act caused the problem. Another can undo the problem. Simply follow the law. Make your legal name truly legal and register it. This is what we do in Claim the Name, guys. Okay, this is exactly what you're doing, is you're not committing fraud anymore. There is now a separation. So let's keep reading what Bill says here. Then you have a government document that reflects you are not the name. The name is a business. How can you be a business? You can't. No more than an employee of Xerox can claim to be Xerox. They used to put Department of Commerce at the top of the document, but that was a little too obvious for the small hat's taste. So if you want to register that name, again, if you need to understand why you need to do that, re-listen to the last 3 minutes of what I just read to you, what Bill wrote, okay? That's all you need to know. There is no other, I get all these questions of people, well, what's the benefit? Why would I do this? Blah, 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 blah. It's like instead of thinking logically or doing any kind of research when I've given y'all so much information on TikTok on why to do this, right? This is all you need. This is all you need to know. You have been committing fraud. You are responsible to register the name because you have been claiming to be that name. It's like if you were a Facebook employee and were claiming to be Facebook or Amazon or whatever, right? So if you want to get claim the name, it is in the description below. You can go ahead and get claim the name. It's only $29.99, which I think is super affordable. I walk you through step by step how to fill out that registration to make sure that, you know, everything is done properly. And then there's a separation between you and the legal entity. So let's go back to our birth certificate PDF and keep reading from there. The hospital documented your birth with the legal name in a distinctive style for which they created a certificate of live birth in all capital letters, which was filed with the local registrar and registered with the state within 5 days after your delivery. It was also sent to Washington, D.C., for which the hospital receives a check for the delivery of the cargo from the vessel, your mother. Then the local registrar issued your parents a copy of the receipt for the cargo, the certificate of birth from the state in all capital letters, representing the abandonment of your title to your own child by registration. The state then created a constructive trust behind your back and placed a value on it based on actuarial estimates of the future value of this newborn labor / human resource. Now, this is important, guys. This is what you need to understand about the trust conversation. Everybody wants to talk about the Sesquippy trust, this and that. We're going to get into this here in a little bit, but what's important to understand is the value of the trust is based on an estimate of the future value that the newborn can provide, that this new member of society can provide to society. Does that make sense? If you study banking and how banking works, it's all based on promissory notes, which we'll get into here in a second too in the PDF, but that's what's so important. So it's not that this trust is created and there is, you know, this number value that's attached to it. No. It's based on a promise and a faith that you, as an asset of the government, will provide value. Okay. So this gets into like a much deeper conversation, which we don't need to get into, but it basically just shows us that all money is fake anyway. This trust is fake. There's no point in, you know, trying to hack the system, quote unquote, in this way of trying to access the trust. There are processes that you can learn, but at the end of the day, it's a debt-based system. And debt isn't real. There's no debt out there. It's all based on the value you can the projected value you can provide society. Okay. So we can get into that, you know, the deeper conversation another time. But essentially what you need to understand is all value comes from your life and the predicted value that you will add to society. So it's all an estimate. It's a future projection. None of it is based in reality. There's not like a monetary value that's like, okay, this baby's worth $17 million, right? No, it's not like that. Okay. So let's keep going with this PDF. Then they issued a bond against the trust asset, a certificate of indebtedness, and funded the bond through the International Monetary Fund, or IMF for short, based on your child's future earnings from their labor as the contributing beneficiary, which is a trust asset. They also set up a Federal Reserve account for the same. So now the legal title is now vested with the state, with the governor acting as the managing fiduciary trustee, the Secretary of State Registrar acting as fiduciary trustee until you turn of legal age, and your parents acting as fiduciary trustees for the trust with duties and obligations until you attain legal age. Okay. So I want to look at the EMF or the IMF here just for a second. So the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is a collection of 190 countries working to foster global monetary cooperation, secure financial stability, facilitate international trade, promote high employment and sustainable economic growth, and reduce poverty around the world. Now, what are the countries that are a part of this collective, of this fund? Well, this is a list of all of the countries. Why do I bring this up? Well, what I think would be really interesting is to look into which of these countries, let's say Denmark, for example, or France, which of these countries have incentives in place. Finland is another one here, right? So a lot of these European countries, which of these countries have incentives in place, monetary incentives, for their citizens to have children? Okay, I know France, for one, has monetary incentives. I don't know if they still do, but I know up until recently they did provide incentives, monetary incentives for citizens to have children, where they have paid medical care, they can get a stipend from the government on like a monthly or a yearly basis. I don't know how it works, okay? But I know that there are countries, and I can guarantee you a majority of them are a part of this 190 countries. We've got Hong Kong, we've got China, right? I mean, I know these are places, from what I've heard, that have incentives. Japan is one, right? For people to have children. Okay. And they have programs available for people that if you have a child, you can get these XYZ benefits. Now, if we're thinking in terms of what we just read, why would these governments of these countries have these incentives in place for their citizens? Usually it's not that much money, right, that they're getting for having the child. They're getting a little bit of extra help with things here and there, but it's not like you're getting a massive reward for having a child. It just makes it easier for people to have children, right? Whereas in the US, they make it harder for us, I guess. So just something to think about, and something that I think could be a really interesting rabbit hole for people to go down. This was just something that I thought of when I, read this specific section of the PDF, and I thought, it'd be really interesting to look at the incentives that these countries offer to mothers or to women to have children, for families to have children, right? Why else would they do that if they did not benefit from these people having children, from citizen having children, right? Just something to think about. It's a thought provoker for you today. Okay, so let's keep going. They also set up a Federal Reserve account for the same. So now the legal title is now vested with the state. Okay, we already read the section. I'll keep going. The state claims an interest in every child within its jurisdiction. Now, if we were to look at, the IMF countries, I can guarantee you that your child needs to be registered with the state in order to claim the benefits that they're saying you can get if you have that child, whatever the incentives are. So there's another side of the coin, is, it's a way, especially in places like Italy and where, I think there's some more rural, like very small village type places without a lot of massive hospitals. I can see these countries trying to incentivize citizens to have children, not just to have children, but to register their children. Okay, that's really what it comes down to. It's not just to have children, it's to register your child so you can take advantage of the incentives. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, if I think about it logically, like if I were someone who is, benefiting, I'm part of the system, I'm whoever the, big dog people are at the top that are creating these systems, and I'm seeing that in a country like Italy, for example, where there's a lot of rural areas where people are having children, without registering them, I would want to be like, hey, let me get a carrot and dangle it in front of you to get you to register your child because it monetarily benefits me if you do so, right? Because now I can do this whole complex system of creating a trust and having all these, all this stuff going on. So, anyway, food for thought. So, here we go. The state will, if it deems it necessary, nullify your parental rights and appoint a guardian in what is this called? In parentheses, trustee over your children. The subject of every birth certificate is a child. The child is a valuable asset, which, if properly trained, why do we have school systems? Ding, ding, ding. Can contribute valuable assets provided by its labor for many years. It is presumed by those who have researched this issue that the child itself is the asset of the trust established by the birth certificate, and the Social Security number is the numbering or registration of the trust, allowing for the assets of the trust to be tracked. If this information is true, your child is now owned by the state. Each one of us, including our children, are considered assets of the bankrupt United States. We are now designated by this government as human resources with a new crop born every year. You are now a vessel of the corporation known as the United States, documented by registration under the laws of the United States and subject to its laws and jurisdiction. And the title goes to the alien property custodian in Washington, D.C. The only vessel they have jurisdiction over is the trust. That is evidenced by the certificate of live birth, establishing the 3 points of jurisdiction: name, social security number, and date of birth. The Federal Reserve account is under the supervision of the Secretary of the Treasury, who is also the managing trustee for the Social Security Administration and governor for the IMF. The IMF has a beneficial interest in and out of the trust estate. The registrar had the fiduciary duty and obligation for that trust up until you started your first job. That is why the state can take the child away from the parents, because it is the duty and obligation of the fiduciary trustee as guardian to look after the ward and make sure the government's property is taken care of properly. When your parents filled out the application form SS5 for a social security card for you, you then became the contributing beneficiary of that trust with the duties and obligations for filing and paying the licensing taxes, registration taxes, and taxes on profits, gains, and income generated for the trust once it starts to operate in commerce with a social security card / number on all commercial transactions. You, on behalf of the beneficial owner, the trust, are granted a license to enter into commerce. For the owner, the trust, with a fiduciary duty for paying, satisfying, compromising, or giving security for the payment or satisfaction of any debt or obligation, and for drawing, accepting, paying, presenting for acceptance or payment, or endorsing any negotiable instrument, or chose an action on behalf of the trust. Unknowingly, your parents agreed to allow you to be made responsible for a trust that is under the control of the corporation known as the United States, even though you are a sovereign free human being who is above and beyond the control and jurisdiction of that same corporation. So they've got this example of a birth certificate here. The state of Louisiana, this record is valid for birth only. State of Louisiana, certificate of live birth. So there's a number here at the top in the upper left corner. And it says American Banknote Company at the very, very bottom here. It's like very small font. So it says here, let's take a pause to look at the birth certificate above. You will see the red numbers and you will see the fact that it is in reality a banknote. So they used to put this on birth certificates. This is what I was saying, is I don't think you're going to find this nowadays on any birth certificate. However, there are these like barcodes on the side of like a Texas birth certificate, for example. I just looked one up, and there are these barcodes on the left side with a number. And you're like, huh, what's that? Is that the banknote number that they're not disclosing as a banknote? Right? So I don't know. Anyway, here we go. So congratulations. You and I are negotiable financial instruments, securities. Since the early 1960s, state governments have issued birth certificates to persons with legal fictional names using all caps names. This is not a lawful record of your physical birth, but rather the acknowledgement of the birth of the juristic, all caps, person. It may appear to be your true name, but since no proper name is ever given in all caps, either lawfully or grammatically, it does not identify who you are. The birth certificate is the government's self-created government of title for its new property, you and me. However, I want to clarify it. It's a little confusing in this document because it talks about, you know, you being property of the government. And really what is important to understand is that the person, the straw man, is what is property of the government, right? They actually legally cannot make you property of the government. So that is why they have to pull this magic trick, the sleight of hand, and essentially make it to where, you know, you are posing to be the business, which is what Bill was talking about here, right? Is you are not the business, yet you are claiming to be the business. So you are claiming jurisdiction of the US government over yourself, right? Because you're claiming to be the business. Okay. So let's keep going. A banknote is a type of negotiable instrument, a promissory note made by a bank payable to the bearer on demand, used as money, and in many jurisdictions, it is legal tender. Along with coins, banknotes make up the cash or bearer forms of all modern money. This is why the trust conversation never goes the way it's supposed to, because people don't understand this concept. You need to understand that even if the birth certificate is a banknote, it is a negotiable instrument, a promissory note. It's a projection of your future value, of the business's future value. Does that make sense? So there's not like, because money isn't real and all of it is just based on promissory notes, there isn't this, like, you know, safe with cash in it or a bank account with a bunch of zeros in it that's in your name. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. Birth certificates now appear to at least qualify as warehouse receipts under the Uniform Commercial Code. The items included on a warehouse receipt, as described at 7202 of the Uniform Commercial Code, the law which governs commercial paper and transactions which parallel a birth certificate, are the location of the warehouse where the goods are stored, residence, the date of issue of the receipt, the date issued, the consecutive number of the receipt found on the back or the front of the certificate, usually in red numbers, a description of the goods or of the packages containing them, name, sex, date of birth, etc. The signature of the warehouse man, which may be made by his authorized agent, a municipal clerk, or state registrar's signature. Once a state has registered a birth document with the U.S. Department of Commerce, the department notifies the Treasury Department, which takes out a loan from the Federal Reserve. The Treasury uses the loan to purchase a bond. The Fed holds a purchase money security interest in the bond from the Department of Commerce, which invests the sale proceeds in the stock or bond market. This is why people can put their, like, social security number on what's it? What's that website that I'm thinking of? The Dunford and Bradstreet. I don't know why I can't think of it right now, but you can look it up there, or at least there used to be a website where you could, and you can see thousands and thousands and thousands of trades being made on that number. And that's because it's the corporation, it's the business, right? The Treasury Department then issues Treasury securities in the form of Treasury bonds, notes, and bills, using the bonds as surety for the new securities. So again, these are securities being traded on the market. And there is a website, I believe still, that you can look this up now. They changed the website because people were starting to catch on and look up their numbers and look up the information of different state departments and be like, why is the state of Maryland being, traded on the bond market? What's going on? It's like, well, because it's all a massive corporation with bits and pieces being traded as securities. Anyway, let's keep going. The cycle is based on the future tax revenues of the legal person whose name appears on the birth certificate. Again, future tax revenues. This also means that the bankrupt corporate U.S. can guarantee to the purchasers of their securities the lifetime labor and tax revenues of every citizen of the United States / American with a birth certificate as collateral for payment. This device is initiated simply by converting the lawful true name of the child into a legal juristic name of a, quote, person. Legally, your doppelganger, the person with an all capital letter name who mirrors you exactly, is considered to be an indentured servant to the various federal, state, and local governments, also known as corporations, via your state issued and state created birth certificate in the name of your all caps person. Birth certificates are issued so that the issuer can claim exclusive title to the legal person created thereby. It makes us a kind of corporation whose name is the same as our real name, but easily distinguished because it is written in all caps. This person then generates taxes and wealth over its lifetime, and in this way repays the collateral that Uncle Sam borrowed from the Federal Reserve. Now, something we need to understand. The Federal Reserve is not a government agency. It is a private for-profit business like McDonald's. The Federal Reserve prints our dollar. However, the Federal Reserve printing our national dollar, our currency in this country, is the same as if McDonald's created McBucks and printed those, and our government, aka the various corporations that make up our government, decided that McBucks were the official currency of the United States. It is literally the same thing. So, if anyone ever, tries to tell you anything about Federal Reserve this, Federal Reserve that, just remember, what the Federal Reserve is doing is the equivalent of a business like McDonald's creating McBucks and us using that as official currency. It's a clown show, guys. It's a circus. Okay, so let's keep going. But more importantly, since the government created this fictional corporate person, it can legally claim jurisdiction and legal control over its creation. You are a free sovereign human being. The UCC commercial laws do not apply to you unless you agree to contract with the government through this straw man. With the issuance of a birth certificate on this fictional character, the straw man is placed into the international commerce. The government issues a bond on the birth certificate. This value may vary, and the bond is sold on a securities exchange. It is believed that these bonds are usually purchased by the same corporation, the Federal Reserve Bank. The bonds are then stored at the Depository Trust Corporation at 55 Water Street in New York City, about 2 blocks down the street from the Federal Reserve. It is a high-rise office building, and the sign in front reads, "The Tower of Power." The living human being becomes the surety which guarantees the eventual payback of the bond. Creating the certificate is simple. The trick is to get the baby to continue to volunteer to pay through all of his or her life. Your future earnings and the taxes that they will generate are what give this negotiable instrument its value. So do we see how this whole system is all complexly, very, very complicated, in a complicated way, interwoven, interconnected, and all of these strings are connected to make sure that it makes sense and that it works, and that these people at the top who created these systems are able to benefit from it, right? That then can play around with these negotiable instruments and create money out of thin air based on the value of a human life. Interesting stuff. Very dystopian if you're like, a doomsday prepper or whatever, but I wouldn't be afraid. We have God on our side. So, if we are with him, who can be against us? Right? All right, here we go. Contrary to what many people believe, sorry, let me reread that. Contrary to what many people have postulated, this bond is of no value to you because you do not own it. This is so important to understand, you guys. I'm going to read this again. Contrary to what many people have postulated, this bond is of no value to you because you don't own it. Do you hear me? Okay. Anyone out there who's trying to sell you on accessing the Sesquipedalian Trust, I don't care if it's that popular guy from the early 2000s who did a bunch of meetings in person and told you blah, 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 blah. I don't care, guys. You don't own it. It has no value to you. Okay. The bond is only of value to the corporate United States and to the purchaser of the bond. Who is it valuable to? The United States, who owns it, and those elites at the top who are playing around with these financial instruments on the market. That's it. So trying to go down the rabbit hole of free money is a waste of time, guys. Please don't do it. I beg you. I beg you, please do not waste your time with that. It is a total waste of your time. Your time is way better spent figuring out how to be a good business person and creating a business. That is how your time is better spent. Instead of like freaking out and being a doomsday prepper and, all this other stuff, which I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying don't live in fear, right? The Bible says, fear not, do not fear, right? It says 365 times, do not have fear, right? So I think that tells us something. Here we go. Let's keep going, guys. That value would be destroyed if you ever woke up and realized that you are not a person. You are not a fictional corporation with a name similar to yours, but in all capitals. You are not liable to pay taxes. You are sovereign and free, and you can only be tricked into volunteering your income to the IRS because you do not understand the truth. Okay, this is so important, this whole section. Do you see why this PDF was so valuable and I wanted to go over it with you guys? Okay. This value, that value of the bond would be destroyed if you ever woke up and realized that you are not a person. Guys, this is great news because if you're here and, this is the first time you're hearing this, congratulations, you've been red-pilled, you're awake, right? But most of you have some kind of awareness of this. You are awake. So that means you don't need to be taken advantage of anymore. Right? You can do your revocation of election and stop contracting with, these corporations that are not beneficial to you, these contracts that aren't beneficial to you. Now, that doesn't mean that we completely opt out of the system. There's still a game at play here. And if you care about your family, you care about your future, you can take advantage of it, right? You can take advantage of the processes within your moral grounds and values, right? I'm not saying be a horrible person. and, screw people over. I'm saying learn the game, play by the rules, and win so you can create generational wealth for your family. You can take care of your family and privatize them and protect them and, leave a legacy and do all of these things that these people who created the system in the first place that are purchasing the bonds do the same stuff that they're doing, right? But with good morals, not trying to turn people into cattle and, everything that they're doing here. So finally, we're at the end. Your birth certificate registers the birth of a fictional corporate person that the government can't control. You only believe that your birth certificate name is the same thing as you. So that's what it comes down to, guys, is the birth certificate, even if you get a certificate of live birth, okay, which is what we read Bill say earlier, even if you get a certificate of live birth, it is describing the corporation, it's describing the business. That you honestly, you don't have a birth certificate unless your parents like got one of these bad boys, just a regular schmegular birth certificate that they crafted themselves or like got from the hospital as a memento, and it's not an official registration. You don't have an actual birth certificate, right? That is just for you, the living man or woman. Now, the last piece that I wanted to talk to you guys about before we wrap up here is I know that all of this information is super helpful. You're like, this is so interesting. Thank you, Lisa. And I'll go, you're very welcome. Thank you for being here. Stick around for the next one. Right? However, I know that there are those of you who are having children and you're confused about what should I do? Do I just not register them at all? Well, the problem is, again, the conversation we just had, right? Where we want to do the best thing for our children and we want to make sure that they are set up for success in the system. And everything comes down to a give and take, negotiation, sacrifice all day long. That's all life is about. And we all know that, right? So I will share what I'm doing. Okay. I am currently pregnant. My baby is due at the end of September. I will probably make a follow-up video like at the end of this year, maybe at the beginning of next year with what I end up doing and kind of give you guys more of like an in-depth, overview of what I did and why I did the things that I did. But I'll give you a quick gist of kind of where I'm at right now of what I want to do for him. So initially I thought, okay, I'm not going to register him, not going to get him a social security number. I'm just going to, create my own affidavit of birth. I'll get it notarized. I'll get a few witnesses to sign off on it. Bada bing, bada boom, he has a document he can use for, proof of birth. Because and I did extensive research on this. That's why I came to this conclusion. It's not just like something that I came up with. It's just like, oh, this will be good to do. No, I mean, when you look at a passport application, which is really the only ID you would ever need to like function in society, technically, but it's up to you whether you decide to have a license and all this other stuff. We'll talk about that more in the next episode. However, initially that was my goal. I was like, okay, I'm going to create my own document. I know enough about affidavits. I've crafted plenty of them at this point. And so I actually already have the document done for him. I just have to like fill out the time and the, everything else, but all just the fill in the blanks of like the time he was born, his full name, all these different things. However, I already have that done. However, I was going to not get him a social security number. Then I was going through my mentor Bill's Facebook group, as I do, and I saw him post this. Somebody had posted about, what to get their children. And actually, I'm going to get on the phone with him and talk with him about this more because I want his input. And I've done a few different things, guys. This is like one of the rabbit holes I'm going down to figure out what do I need to do for my child. And I do get questions about this from you guys. So it's like, I'm not going to leave you hanging. I'm going to try to help you, but I just know that it won't be immediate. But this is what Bill said. He said, I wouldn't be fearful or worried in any way about my child being assigned a social security number. Now you could do yourself a good solid by not having the certificate of live birth until the child is no longer a child, but they will have some difficulty getting that stuff when they turn 18. They need that account to do business in the modern system. I wouldn't want to handicap my kid that way unless you have access to significant resources, millions of dollars, and significant assets so they can basically live through trust, which they can anyways, but it's going to be a real pain in the butt without the resources. I guess the question is, why do such? What is it you fear? CPS, courts, an ex-spouse? Learn how to operate with no liability and learn how to interact with government. That's the best protection for your child. So, once again, this is what it comes down to, guys. It comes down to education and us knowing who the F we are. We need to know, one, that you are not that name that they assigned to you. And if you're having a child, what is the best thing for me to do? Right? Like, I don't want to handicap my child so that, he can't do anything. So what I'll probably end up doing is I was already planning on having that affidavit of live birth. So what I will likely do is I will use that and, whatever other verification they require to get a social security number for him. Okay, don't freak out. All right. Because remember how the system works is it's a sequence of things. The registration of the birth happens, then they create that trust account, the business, and then there's that social security name to link to the trust to identify it. Now, if he doesn't have that, right, if he doesn't have that registration, the business, then the social security number basically stands on its own and is just a tool for him to use in the system. As far as I can tell, I am going to talk to Bill Moore about this. I'm going to call him I just haven't made the time to call him, but I will call him at some point and just kind of game plan with him of like what the best thing to do is. Now, here's the other thing. I also reached out to, there is a Instagram account that I trust most of their information, and they're like a ministry. I don't know. It's a whole thing, but they basically help people with, sovereignty processes and, all these different things. And they had a promotion that they were doing. They posted about having a home birth package. So I emailed them and inquired and was like, what's included in your home birth package? Mostly because I wanted to know, like, what are these people doing? And essentially what it sounds like to me is they help you create a birth certificate, which I've already done, and then they help you go through the passport application process to get him a passport. And I think that was about it. Like, there wasn't anything in there that seemed like something I couldn't do on my own. So I'll probably do that also, get the passport done. Now, again, I'm probably going to create a follow-up episode to this at the end of the year, so just remind me if you're watching this. Hello, people in the future. How is it? Are the cars driving themselves yet? Just comment below, if you're watching this in December of 2024 or whatever later than that, and I haven't made a follow-up episode. Just be like, hey, Lisa, remember you said you were going to make a follow-up episode when your child was born and you did all of this hard work that we need to know what you did, then I'll be like, oh yes, this is what I did. Let me make an episode and I'll let you know. Right. So just let me know and I'll make that for you guys. But that's my plan as of now. Create our own private birth certificate, not register, hopefully get a social security number with that, and then hopefully get a passport with that. And then I think he'll be good. Okay. And then, he can figure it out once he's 18, honestly. I mean, I'm still going to like try to figure things out for him as we go. But, I think right now we're at a time where a lot of things are changing in society. A lot of us are waking up to this and hopefully, getting out of the system as much as we can and privatizing ourselves, but we still have to operate in commerce. So anyway, that's my plan. I'm not recommending that if you're having a child, that's what you do. I'm just saying that's what I'm doing. You do with that information what you will. So that's pretty much everything for this episode, you guys. If you enjoyed this, then I would really appreciate you sharing this with a friend, with somebody you care about, somebody you think would benefit from this information. That would super duper help our cause here. And please let me know in the comments what else you want to see me make content about. If there's anything you want me to talk about, I will be more than happy to do that. I did get one of you guys commenting on my last episode, so let me take a look here and see if I can find that, because I'll answer it here right now if I can help you. So let's take a look at what this guy said here real quick. I should have had it pulled up, so I apologize for the minor delay here. However, oh, here we go. I can look at the notifications. So this person said, oh, let me pause this so it doesn't play. Okay. Here we go. So this person said, can you talk about the steps you recommend for US citizens that are born from another country and are trying to get out of the public? So if you're looking to do that, you can get Claim the Name. It's going to be linked below in the description. And we just talked about it here. So hopefully you watch this episode and, you're aware of why you would want to do that. But what you want is the separation from the public entity, which is that legal entity, right? So go ahead and do Claim the Name. That is the first thing I would recommend. If you're asking about steps as far as like you want to do state national stuff, that's going to be a different conversation. But as far as what you're saying here, you can do Claim the Name, right? Follow the steps there. And that'll create that separation between you and the legal entity. That's really all you need, at the end of the day, but people like to overcomplicate it. So, you can go ahead and do that. That's what I'd recommend. So Claim the Name. Again, it's only $29.99 US dollars. Pretty affordable, in my opinion. So you can go ahead and get that. And then you can stay tuned for the next episode if you want to hold off on getting Claim the Name, because we're going to talk about the assumed name next episode. So we will go over another PDF surprise. And this one's going to be by a fellow named Herrick Douglas Joseph, who is an awesome guy that was a trailblazer with this information at the time. He is someone that my mentor Bill has worked with and has learned a lot from him. I'll warn you, the PDF is some of the languaging is a little difficult to get through because he's like older and not necessarily PC, which doesn't really bother me, but it does some people, so just be aware. I don't think most of you care about that. I think most of you are pretty chill as far as that goes, but some people might get offended, so I'm just letting you know in advance, to bring your offended hat if you want and put it on. But we'll go through that next week. We'll just or not next week. I don't know if it'll be next week. Hopefully, I don't know. Maybe I'll do these weekly. But we'll do that in the next episode and make sure that we're going through, just like we did today, pulling up other references. We'll be looking at laws, which will be fun because he references a lot of different laws in there. So we'll do that. I think we'll have fun doing that. And again, please leave a comment below. Please share this with someone and make sure you're subscribed if you're watching on YouTube, if you're on Rumble. I think it's a subscription or a follow or whatever it is, just come join us. I'm new to Rumble, so, be patient with me. But we'll kind of follow the same format, and then at the end I'll answer any questions you guys have. So make sure you leave those comments because I will look at the previous episode and go, oh, hey, here's an answer to that if I can answer it, right? Or maybe it'll be an episode that I create in the future. So I do really, appreciate all of your feedback. So I hope this was valuable to you. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, y'all.